I began in the oldest parts of the city, with doors, stairwells, and furniture that did not fit a familiar human scale. Some doorways rise to 14 feet, staircases continue beyond a single stride, and benches and tables sit low beside frames that seem too large. In the margins of 19th century photographs, silent figures stand ahead above the crowd. These recurring details suggest something quietly unsettling. I followed those images into archives, Napoleonic correspondence, cabinet card ledgers, municipal blueprints, and museum accession records contain measurements and descriptions that match what the photographs show. The photographs themselves appear in consistent formats, carte de visite, tintypes and cabinet cards, which makes the similarity harder to dismiss. The pattern raises questions about scale, function, and intent. Oversized proportions are not confined to monuments or pageantry. They appear in government offices, administrative halls, and other functional spaces, places one would expect built to practical human dimensions. Why would these spaces be constructed at such scale? And who used them? Newspapers reported, according to archived material. Old maps and encyclopedias record a place called Tartaria, and then the name fades from later atlases. Around the end of the 19th century and into the early 1900s, newspapers reported discoveries of unusually large skeletons. Those lines of reporting then slow or stop. Missing artifacts, sparse follow-up, and institutional silence form a pattern that does not resolve easily. As a working hypothesis, it is possible that unusually tall people filled specific roles as administrators, overseers, or builders, and that photographs and oversized architecture record their presence. Photographs suggest that possibility. Historical records indicate reports of large finds, and the pattern raises questions about why those leads received so little sustained inquiry. I do not claim certainty. The evidence invites closer examination, and the search begins where evidence refuses to shrink to fit the official record. In the archives of the George Eastman Museum and the Library of Congress, certain 19th century photographic formats stand out for their precision and consistency. Photographs suggest that cabinet cards, just over 4 by 6 inches, and cartes de visite, smaller at 2.5 by 4 inches, were the standard for studio portraits from the 1860s through the 1890s. When these formats are examined across collections, a pattern emerges, and that pattern raises questions about scale and intent. A handful of portraits dated between 1868 and 1894 show individuals whose height appears far beyond the ordinary. 9 cabinet cards and 3 cartes de visite, each bearing studio backmarks and session dates, document these figures, often posed beside typical chairs or standing with average-sized companions. The details are methodical. Studio backmarks sometimes read J. H. Whitehurst, New York, 1871, or Sarony, Broadway, 1883, and those marks, pressed into the cardstock or inked on the reverse, act as a silent ledger tracking the provenance of each photograph. Some cards align with known performers such as Martin Van Buren Bates and Anna Swan, whose heights, verified at nearly 8 feet, are noted in contemporary accounts and medical reports. Other portraits remain anonymous, yet the scale cues feel deliberate. The seat of a chair, a studio ruler, the measured gap between heads. Metadata spreadsheets from museum holdings list each card by accession number, date, and photographer, allowing for a count and comparison across decades. The frequency and clustering of these images, especially when paired with clear backmarked evidence, raises questions about how many such figures moved through the studios of the era and what motivated photographers to document them with such care. In my investigation, I began with municipal blueprints from the mid-19th century, and historical records indicate features that appear out of proportion to modern eyes. Philadelphia's 1864 Municipal Services Building, for example, lists door frames at 14 feet and stair risers at 18 inches, according to Historic American Buildings survey records and City Council minutes. These precise measurements appear repeatedly in administrative plans, and the scale itself is striking, outsized when compared with later standards. These dimensions surface not only in Philadelphia, but in city halls and police stations across the United States and in Europe. London's administrative halls from the 1870s, as documented in British Library plans, show 13-foot doors and broad staircases. Official explanations preserved in meeting notes cite practical needs, improved ventilation, easier movement for horse-drawn equipment, and fire safety. Yet those justifications do not always align with the daily functions of many rooms, which handled paperwork and routine governance rather than heavy machinery, and that tension deserves attention. Practical reasons do not resolve every anomaly. Architectural historians have noted that oversized elements are not confined to ceremonial entrances or grand foyers. Instead, they appear in corridors, stairwells, and offices, spaces designed for regular use. This pattern raises questions about the intended users. Some city architects of the era, referenced in planning correspondence, discuss accommodating large crowds or future-proofing for unknown needs. A few minutes from the 1880s council meetings even mention the challenge of building for all statures and purposes. The recurring presence of these features suggests a pattern that merits closer inquiry. While mainstream accounts attribute the choices to foresight and practicality, the recurring scale of these elements, especially when paired with photographic evidence of unusually tall individuals, encourages careful speculation rather than immediate conclusion. Photographs from the mid to late 19th century, in formats such as cabinet cards, tintypes, and cartes de visite, suggest people of exceptional height standing next to average-sized acquaintances. Could some buildings have been designed, at least in part, for a functional class of workers or administrators who were themselves of exceptional height? The architectural record does not answer that question directly, but the consistency of these design choices invites a closer look at who or what those spaces were meant to serve. Atlases from the 18th century and the early 19th century routinely labelled vast stretches of Asia and Siberia as Tartary and Tartaria. The David Rumsey map collection includes dozens of examples, from a 1637 Mercator atlas to an 1850 European survey, each featuring the name in bold cartouches stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific. In these early works, Tartaria appears as a single, undefined expanse, often subdivided into regions such as Chinese Tartary or independent Tartary. By the middle of the 19th century, that label begins to disappear. British Library holdings from 1875 still reference Tartary, but later editions transition to more precise geographic names: Mongolia, Manchuria, and Siberia, reflecting new boundaries mapped by Russian and European survey teams. By 1900, only about 1 in 5 major atlases still display the Tartary label, according to catalogue surveys from the Rumsey and British Library collections. The Encyclopaedia Britannica mirrors this trend, with its 9th edition published between 1875 and 1889, devoting lengthy entries to Tartary, while the 1911 11th edition omits it almost entirely. Editorial notes from the period cite the adoption of Russian imperial data and updated colonial surveys as primary reasons for the change. Survey memos from the British Ordnance Survey in the 1890s recommend dropping Tartary as a term, favouring the new geopolitical divisions. The coordinated loss of this name across maps and reference works raises questions about whether the disappearance was simply a matter of improved accuracy or part of a broader pattern of erasure seen elsewhere in the historical record. The pattern raises questions, and archived material points to a sequence of changes that merits further investigation rather than a single, undisputed explanation. Between 1870 and 1895, American newspapers published more than 250 articles describing the discovery of giant human skeletons, bones said to measure 7 feet, 10 feet, even 12 feet. Reports from places like the Kanawha Valley in West Virginia detailed chains of custody and named local doctors who supposedly received the remains. Headlines promised follow-up investigations, yet within months those stories faded or were quietly retracted. Regional editors sometimes cited mismeasurement or confusion with animal bones, but they rarely offered new evidence. Museum records from the same period show no corresponding influx of oversized human remains. The Smithsonian's annual reports, which catalogue thousands of artifacts and bones from mound excavations, make no mention of skeletons matching the dimensions described in the press. Letters from museum staff archived in institutional correspondence discuss routine shipments but never confirm receipt of giant bones. Records that should exist, at least in the official trail, appear to be absent. After 1905, the stream of giant skeleton stories almost completely vanishes from the public record. The Chronicling America database shows a sharp decline in such reports. What had been a steady pattern drops to almost nothing within a few years. This abrupt silence, paired with the absence of physical evidence in museum collections or scientific publications, leaves a gap that has never been fully explained. The pattern raises questions about what happened to the bones, the press interest, and the official curiosity that once surrounded these finds. Newspapers reported discoveries, museums logged ordinary shipments, and yet the follow-up is missing. Were specimens misplaced, misidentified, or discarded? Were reports exaggerated and later corrected, or does the pattern point to something else entirely? Each possibility remains a hypothesis, and the historical trail, for now, is incomplete. Today, official archives still hold gaps where answers might be found. As digital records grow, unexplained omissions persist. The pattern raises questions. Some histories are rewritten, not by discovery, but by what quietly disappears. Photographs suggest recurring anomalies. Historical records indicate sudden silences, and newspapers reported discoveries that then fade from the public record. The pattern raises questions more than answers, and it is that pattern which calls for careful, open investigation.